all of this is to remove those elements that would be triggering, that would create that rush of adrenaline, that would create that fear and anxiety, and replace it with the things that are normal in childhood and the things that intentionally create this sense of self and safety and belonging, so that hopefully when you leave camp, even just after 5 days, you can have a piece of your childhood back, but also a glimpse of what your future could look like.
Hello and welcome to the S'more Stories podcast, brought to you by Camp Boggy Creek near sunny Orlando, Florida. Founded by actor Paul Newman and General Norman Schwarzkopf, Camp Boggy Creek provides life-changing camp experiences to children with serious medical illnesses at zero cost to their families. In our podcast, we'll talk about the impact that recreational therapy has on children, stories of campers, their families, staff members, volunteers, and all who have been part of the magic that is Camp Boggy Creek. Enjoy the show, and hey, to learn more about Camp Boggy Creek, visit boggycreek.org.
Hello and welcome back to S'more Stories. I'm your host, Lizzie, and I have Dan here with me once again, our CEO here at Camp Boggy Creek, and we're going to be talking about how camp can be used as an outlet for our campers. So welcome back, Dan.
Thank you, Lizzie. It's great to be back with you today.
Yes, it's great to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about how camp impacts our campers, how we're very intentional about building resilience and helping campers overcome medical trauma as well as any other traumas that they may be experiencing before they come to camp. It's a big piece of what we do here.
Yeah, definitely. So I do know to a certain extent we do provide a level of recreational therapy in order to combat trauma. What is some of the background knowledge we have in regards to recreational therapy?
Yeah, so what we know is children do a lot of their exploration, a lot of their brain development comes from play. They're learning how to navigate the world, how to navigate relationships, how to work in teams. Play is such a big piece of child development. And for children who have their childhoods interrupted by serious illnesses, oftentimes they can't engage in the kind of play that every other child gets to engage in. They might be too vulnerable for certain sports or other activities. The trips to the doctors or the children's hospital can take up a lot of time. And so in many cases, children miss a big piece of that childhood experience. And so recreational therapy, play therapy, getting opportunities to engage in those things not only helps to replace what's missing in that key kind of developmental function, it also is a key factor in helping children recover from different traumas that they've experienced. Children, generally speaking, when they're experiencing chronic stress, when they're experiencing traumatic events, that can have a huge impact on brain function. It can have a huge impact on developing neural pathways. It's super complicated.
Yeah.
But, for folks who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you can't get your basic needs met, at the bottom of the hierarchy, you've got kind of food and shelter and, those kind of core needs. And then there's safety. And safety is like another core need. And as you go up the hierarchy, like if you don't have those core base needs taken care of, if you don't have food, shelter, and then safety and security, then belonging and love is the next one. And then self-esteem, and then finally self-actualization, becoming the person that it is that you're meant to be. And Maslow's work is older, and so it's very observational. But in the last 30 years, We've learned so much more about adverse childhood experiences and resilience and brain science that we know now what's happening behind that. Essentially, our fight, flight, or freeze response can get triggered by things that are dangerous to us. So it's essentially designed, if you're attacked by a bear, your body is flooding with adrenaline and cortisol so that you can respond to that attack, either to fight or run away, or freeze. So hopefully the animal won't notice you and go away. And it's there to protect us. But when your life is filled with chronic stressors or with dangers of other kinds,
it can be detrimental.
Yeah, whether that's
flips.
Abuses or, let's say, really painful and scary procedures or testing that you have to do if you have a serious illness, then your brain can start to identify those things the same way that they would the bear, and start releasing adrenaline and cortisol, start creating neural pathways so that your brain sees signals of danger. And so it's not unusual for a child who has a traumatic enough experience fighting their illness to have panic attacks when they go to a clinical setting. The sight or smell of a hospital setting can create triggers for people because your brain is looking for signs of that thing that was painful in the past. And so it can create long-term challenges for folks. And what'll tend to happen is in a traditional medical setting or a school setting, folks who are triggered by something that's traumatic will be seen as non-compliant or misbehaving or just difficult. This is a difficult patient, versus recognizing that this is a child or even an adult who in their childhood had these kinds of traumatic experiences or these chronic stressors, and they've been triggered by something. And it's really crucial then to find ways to help them calm down and re-engage the parts of their brain that they need.
It's that underlying element that we want to be able to see and combat.
Yeah.
In that sense of, okay, but why? The why behind. Not just the reaction, but what was the action?
Right.
What is that? What is the cause? What is the trigger? In order to combat those triggers, we have to identify what is causing them to feel triggered. Right. Even something as little and minuscule as a social interaction. If their basic needs aren't being met, that we talk about it. Some of these campers are in a sterile environment where they don't get a lot of social interactions if it's not nurses and doctors and things along those lines. And then they're put into the world on other occasions, and they close themselves out of wanting to feel safe and looking for that safety. So I think one of the things at camp, and it's funny that you brought up safety because I was talking a lot about safety with Maddie, is creating that safe space.
Right.
Creating and fostering a feeling of safety, of comfort, we want everybody who walks in to feel blanketed with like this sensation of I'm okay here. I belong here. I'm okay here. I'm seen here. I'm visible. And that helps to combat those triggers and those negative feelings perhaps, and heal. Like realistically heal some of those things, because there's something as simple as making friends could be so incredibly hard for perhaps somebody who is lacking in social interactions due to a variety of factors with their illness or anything in that regard. So I think it's amazing that we're able here at camp to not only foster those connections, but also heal a little bit of that why. Find the why and combat the why and kind of heal it and send off our campers with that feeling of safety, that feeling of belonging, and yeah, like that blanket of comfort, like, oh, I have a little place, and even building self-esteem. So when they walk out of here, it's not, camp walks with you.
Yeah.
Camp goes with you. That experience of being seen, of being safe, of all of those helps to heal hopefully helps to heal all of our campers. So when they walk outside of those gates, they now have this experience and they have this blanket almost to help them. It's like a little comfort blanket, like, it's building their self-esteem. Yeah. I've built myself up. We help build ourselves, like they help build themselves here. They're able to feel more confident in doing stuff on their lonesome. A lot of people, I got to speak about this with, I believe, a few people actually, about the simplistic factors here at camp. Making their bed.
Right.
They now feel a sense of ownership.
Yep. Yeah, setting the table. Yeah. Serving a meal.
Something so simplistic. And they walk away with that sense of security and I can attitude of I am capable of all these things. I am just capable. Like that's one of the most amazing things. What ways do you see the culmination of these factors when perhaps you see a camper who's come back, or even on camp property, just a culmination of, I see that change in that person. I see that confidence. I see that element in them that I can see that they now feel safe and seen and everything.
Yeah, I think, again, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy and what's happening there, the reason that you can't get to self-esteem and self-actualization if you don't have those basic needs met is because when your brain is going into fight, flight, or freeze response all the time, it actually literally shuts down the parts of your brain in charge of rational thought, problem solving, all your critical thinking areas of the brain, social and emotional regulation, memory, and language, all things that you need to thrive and kind of define the world and yourself. And so what you see happening at camp is, first of all, that blanket of safety you're talking about, like you're coming in, there's going to be meals. Half of our campers receive free and reduced lunch in their schools at home. And so there's going to be 3 meals a day and snacks the entire time you're here. You're going to be fed. You're going to have shelter while you're at camp. You are safe. Like you feel that all around you. You're surrounded by people who are showing you love and respect, and you're doing things that are fun, and you feel that, and that creates this space for the brain to start to function differently, right? So now you're seeing that you're not the only one who's like you. And so you're starting to feel that sense of belonging and that sense of love, which is the next part of the hierarchy, which then opens up space for you to start feeling like, you know what? Maybe I'm awesome, right? Like maybe I am just as cool as anybody else. Maybe I can do anything that anybody else can do. And then that opens up the door for you to imagine self-actualization, what that looks like. Like who could I be now that I've been in this place where I see it? And not just see it because people are telling me that I'm awesome or that I'm going to be okay. But the other incredible thing about camp is you're also now in this part of our history, we've been here long enough, you're surrounded by former campers who had the same illness that you do, who are now counselors or even physicians who are coming back here to pay it forward to another generation of kids. And so you can literally see that's a possible future for me. So when you ask that question, I see it in those former campers coming back to work here. I see it in the oncologist who had cancer as a child who comes back here to volunteer, right? Like, fighting the same illness that he was up against as a kid, but now as a physician and dedicating his life to that. But I also see that in a student I just met who came to a career and internship fair and shared that she was in college because coming to camp, she thought that she could be just like every other kid, that she could dream about college, that she could go and do the things that she hadn't been imagining for herself before she came here and saw that anything is possible for her. And so, we call it magic, and it feels magical what happens at camp, but it's actually science. And so often that's all magic is science that no one has explained to you yet, right? So here's this actual science that's going on, this body chemistry, this brain chemistry. If you think about what I said earlier about adrenaline and cortisol, adrenaline like kind of hypes you up. It makes you, you're too amped. You can't kind of be still and in a space and absorb what's going on when your body's flooded with adrenaline. Cortisol can actually cause weight gain and cause other problems for you and in your health. And so you come into a space where you feel safe and where you're kind of surrounded and protected, and you're not triggered by the things that usually trigger you. For instance, if you've ever heard the phrase white coat syndrome, I heard it in relation to going into the doctor's office and your blood pressure's higher because you see the white coats or you're in that setting and something about it is triggering. So adrenaline makes your blood pressure go up. There's a reason there are intentionally no white coats or stethoscopes around people's necks here at camp. The doctors here look like the counselors here on purpose because we want to take away all those triggering things. Our clinic doesn't look like a clinical setting. The exam table in one of the rooms is a dinosaur, literally.
It's really cool.
Like
it's
not,
really cool.
not an obsolete table. It's a literal dinosaur that you get to sit on if you need to be checked out by a doctor. And so, all of this is to remove those elements that would be triggering, that would create that rush of adrenaline, that would create that fear and anxiety, and replace it with the things that are normal in childhood and the things that intentionally create this sense of self and safety and belonging, so that hopefully when you leave camp, even just after 5 days, you can have a piece of your childhood back, but also a glimpse of what your future could look like. And that's really powerful. And so whether you think it's magic or science, it's important. It's crucial even to a child getting back on track developmentally and getting to a place where they can, as you said, take that experience back home with them. Because unfortunately,
you can't live at camp.
You can't live at camp, and
you got to take it with you. You got to. I said it earlier. You got to bottle it.
Yeah,
we gotta.
And it's the biggest thing or the most common thing that I hear from parents after camp sessions is that this is the one place that their child isn't bullied. Like again, talk about another traumatic experience. You're already fighting this illness that has made you bald or makes you look different, or there's a scar on you somewhere. And in addition to having to face that and possibly even, life-threatening circumstances, you're also getting bullied and teased.
And you don't a lot don't understand why. Because I think, to go on the topic of bullying, I think all of us see each other as equal in the very beginning. And then one day you look in the mirror once people have pointed things out and you're like, oh, I guess I am different. But you don't think of yourself any different in the very beginning. You're just as equal as anybody else. So I love that here at camp, we give them the opportunity. And even there was a testimony that Maddie gave about a scar on two children's chest that they didn't even know was there until later on. And they had created this bond with one another. And then later on, they're like, oh, I physically see myself in you because we have the same scar and we get to bond over this. And it sounds odd how I'm going to word it, but I see myself in you and I see how beautiful you are as a person, apart from the physicality, apart from anything like that. I see you and I see your value. I am going to reflect that on myself. I have value. I am also just as beautiful, as capable, as everything. Yeah. And I think that connection that is able to be fostered here also helps heal so much. And I love that it gets to be carried out throughout their tenure here. And when they walk outside that gate, I was seen And I was valued and I was safe. I was all of those things. And it does help that self-esteem and help that self-actualization. Something as simple as I was able to make my bed. Let's use that one again. I was able and capable of making my bed. What else? It triggers, it's a good trigger, and it triggers that thought of, what else am I capable of that I haven't tried? And that's what I love. Like, what else can I do? And I love that there's that thought of, if I was able to do something like that, I'm going to try everything. I'm going to combat the world.
Right.
I'm going to try and make my bed at home. I'm going to try and take more ownership of chores at home, even though, you don't want to do chores. But like, there's that level of excitement of what else can I do?
Well, and think about the programming side too. Like, I can ride a horse.
Yeah.
If you're a child whose illness has kept you out of a swimming pool, I can get in the swimming pool. I can catch a fish.
Yeah.
There's so many things here that you learn that you can do.
I can do archery.
Yeah.
Like something, things that are, first of all, I've never tried archery, so I don't even know if I'm capable.
Yeah, there are whole communities where archery is not a thing at all. It's not even an option. Yeah.
But I'm capable of anything. Camp makes pretty much everything possible for campers so that they see the realm of possibilities and they have that catalyst of, okay, something I thought was impossible for me to do was possible. Let's say getting into a pool. There's perhaps campers never have gotten into a pool.
Right.
That was possible for me. What else is possible?
Yeah. It's one of the biggest reasons that we have to get the climbing tower and the zip line rebuilt. Because that idea of I can get to the top of this, regardless of what my illness is. Maybe I can't get there alone. But the truth is none of us get anywhere alone, if we're being honest. But I can get to the top of this with a little help from my friends. And then I can do this really, dangerous feeling, risky feeling thing that's, been safety checked and harnessed, but it feels so risky, especially, for me, as a child who didn't grow up with an illness, I would have been terrified of the zip line.
Yeah.
But, growing up with an illness or being confined to a wheelchair, to think that I could get to the top of that tower and then I could zip line down, it's that feeling of, if I can do all these things in these 5 short days, what else can I do?
Yeah.
What's impossible for me when I thought all the stuff that I was doing this week was impossible before I got here and learned that I could do every single thing?
It's that spark, that little spark, that catalyst of that drive forward. Like, okay, from here, everything is possible. So if I want to be a doctor, that's possible. Everything is in my hands. I now know that it's in my hands. Now I get to go do it. And that's why I say you take a little piece of camp with you, because you take that confidence with you. And camp lives in the campers. Camp Boggy Creek lives within you once you leave here.
Well, if you think about it, if you came to camp and before getting through the gates thought to yourself, no one understands what I'm going through. I am the only one. You haven't met anyone else who's going through the illnesses that you have. And I can tell you, as a parent of a child with a serious illness, you're spending so much time in those clinical settings, just getting into the appointment and then rushing back, and you've got other things to do, and there's school and other kids, and you're not stopping at the hospital to socialize, and there aren't necessarily opportunities for conversation or support groups, especially not with a big spoonful of sugar to make it feel like it's something else other than what it really is, which is catering to your behavioral health needs. And so you're coming in here feeling like I'm alone, I'm the only one, no one understands me, I get picked on, I'm getting bullied. If you're coming in with that and you come here and you see I'm not alone, that I am special, that I can be anything that I want to be. I can do things that I want to do. I might need help. I might need some modification, but I can do it. No one can take that away from you once you leave here. Once you know you're not alone, once you know that the formerly impossible can be possible for you, you know that. And so you do take that with you.
You find power in your uniqueness, if anything. You find that, it's not, if I'm being bullied or if I feel different, because perhaps it could be a feeling that they internalize. Even if I feel different, I can make that my power. And I can use that as my power. My power is in my uniqueness, is in my vulnerability, perhaps. That's my power. My power is within that. And it sparks that.
So I'm going to get nerdy for a minute, and then I'll make it seem intellectual. So I'm a huge comic book fan. I've been collecting comic books forever, since I was about 7 years old. Every hero in the comic books has overcome some kind of trauma, some kind of pain or loss. So often when you look at the stories of heroes, they're bullied. And they're experiencing this sense of being an outcast and being alone. And then they find a way to survive what they're going through, and they become a champion of the vulnerable. And it's not just in comic books. So this is the part where I'll make it sound snooty and intellectual. It's in mythology. It's throughout all of our stories for as long as we've been telling stories.
It's the underdog.
Yeah.
The story of the underdog conquering their vulnerability and using that as their powerhouse.
Yeah.
Like, that is their power. I'll get nerdy with you. I love Captain America. Favorite superhero. Captain America had such a drive to, we're going to get nerdy now. Such a drive to go enlist in the military. And he was constantly told, no, you have illnesses, you have it's not possible. He was genuinely told it's not a possible in the realm of possibilities. And then it became possible. And he became super...
He was too sick.
At
first.
He was too sick. He was too... It wasn't in the realm of possibilities. And now, one of the strongest men.
But I love there's a exchange in the movie between the scientist and him, where the scientist asks him, do you want to run off and kill Nazis? And I'm paraphrasing, of course. And his response is, no, I just don't like bullies. And so, everything that's happened to him has given him this fire, to go and protect the vulnerable. And there's a correlation, though, that for the folks who experience trauma, who do not get some form of resilience built into their lives. We'll stay with Captain America for a minute to keep nerding out. But he had Bucky, he had a best friend, he had Bucky's family, who kind of embraced him and took him in. He had these other people who came around him to build resilience around him. But what we find is in stories, in mythology, and in the real world, people who experience adverse childhood experiences and traumas as children and do not get that resilience become the villains of the story. You end up with every character in these comics and in mythology who survives trauma but doesn't get resilience along the way, doesn't find joy somewhere or get surrounded with love and safety and protection. If we
want to stay on the topic, Bucky, when Bucky ends up believing he is the only one left of when he believes Steve to be dead and all of that, and he suffers those traumatic experiences where he's tested on, he has PTSD, don't quote me on that one because I don't think it's diagnosed throughout any of the movies, but has those traumatic experiences and has those trigger words, quite literally, that cause him to act out and act rashly and become the villain. And then you see once he has his support again, you see how he can take a complete 360. Because we see that progress in the movies. This is very much nerding out, but we see it progress in the movies and this is just a great example of this, progress in the movies where he's able to make that complete 360 or, a little bit of a 180 because he's still got some elements to work on. But you see that 360 in him where he now got the necessities.
Right.
He got the support. He got the healing. He got the self-esteem boost because Bucky, if this is such nerdy, he was insecure about his arm. And even in Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier, you see him get teased about it by Anthony Mackie's character, the Falcon, and you see him have vulnerability and insecurity in regards to his disability. And then you see him in Black Panther taking ownership, never wearing the arm even. And you see how he was able to combat that through the support of the Wakandans and things along those lines. And this is nerding out, but bring it all full circle and you're seeing those elements.
Yeah. The resilience, the love, opportunities of joy. Essentially, if you picture a childhood on a fulcrum, think of a teeter-totter or a seesaw, depending on your generational language here. But whenever something bad happens to you, it weighs down that fulcrum on the negative side. Whenever something good happens to you, though, it can balance that out and can even overcome it. Now, the challenge is with childhood trauma is so many bad things can keep happening that it's not just that it moves to one side. It's that the centerpiece that balances it can actually move to make it even harder for positive things to affect you. So you start to see, you think of your glass half empty or a glass half full person. If enough things happen to you and the fulcrum changes where it's located, then it can become harder to see good things in your life. It can be harder to experience joy. And so it is so critical that things like Camp Boggy Creek exist to intervene in a child's life at an early enough point to keep that center of balance from changing and to start balancing things out and even pushing them towards the positive. Because if enough positive things happen to you, then that center of balance can change too and make it harder for the negative things to impact you. You become one of those glass half full people who, even when something bad happens,
twist it,
say, well, it could be worse, and here's all the great things in my life, and you feel insulated. I'll come back to your blanket metaphor. You feel insulated because you've been surrounded by so much love and so many good things and enough joy to hold on to, that you're insulated from that. And the physical manifestation of that is something I saw recently in St. Joseph's Children's Hospital. We were visiting nursing staff and talked to them about camp recruitment. And there was a Camp Boggy Creek camper and her mom that just happened to be there at the same time. This beautiful, wonderful little girl was there to receive her cancer treatment. And she had a port, and she's dealing with these things that no child should ever have to deal with. And what does she have under her arm? She has her Boggy Bear.
That's beautiful.
And I get choked up just talking about it, thinking about it. It's like armor, like that joy and the things that she experienced. She wasn't even 5 days for here. She was here for a family retreat weekend. It was one full day with a partial Friday and a partial Sunday. One full Saturday was enough for her to associate that bear with safety, respect, love, joy, and take it into the scary place with her like a suit of armor. And that's so critical because it helps to balance out all the horrible things that she has to go through and overcome to beat that cancer. She's going to need as much on that other side of the fulcrum as possible. And we give children as much as we can, even in a day, and certainly in 5. We give them everything that we can to face the world.
That's amazing. It's amazing to just see everybody be able to walk outside those gates with that level of confidence and completely renewed their spirit and their drive renewed. I love it here at camp. That's all I can say. But it was great speaking with you. Thank you so much for your insight. I hope to have you back again because I love every one of these conversations.
Thank you. It was great being with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to S'more Stories and for sharing this podcast with a friend. To learn more about Camp Boggy Creek and its year-round programming, ways to get involved, or ways to give, visit boggycreek.org. Thanks again for listening and for sharing the magic that is Camp Boggy Creek.